Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode number 5 of Stone and Straw. I am your faithful host, John Cullen. You can find me on Twitter at Cullen the Curler. You can find this podcast on Twitter at Stone Straw Pod. This podcast, as always, is presented by CurlingZone, brought to you by Hardline Curling and Dynasty Curling. And we took a week off. Thank you, everybody, for being patient with me through that. It was my birthday last week, as I said. I mean, that's probably not a reason to take a week off, but I just wanted this to go a little bit deeper into November, and I also want to make sure that the podcasts are of a super high quality, and I only get a limited amount of space on the site that hosts my podcast. So I wanted to make sure that every episode was of super high quality for you guys, and so taking a week off just made the most sense. So I'm thankful that everybody was patient with me about that, and everybody sent in really nice things last week, being like, oh, I wish there was an episode, and it sucks that there isn't one, and it was really nice to hear from you that people are really excited for it. So thank you for that. I'm getting excited. I'm getting ready to go to the Slam in Thunder Bay. That's a big thank you to CurlingZone for that. I'm going to be doing some social media for CurlingZone while I'm there, and I'm going to be recording basically all of my season 2 episodes at the Slam in Thunder Bay, the tour challenge. So that's going to be super fun. I've played in one Slam myself, played in the tier 2 challenge a couple years ago in Cranbrook. We had a nice run there, actually made the semifinals before we lost to the eventual winner, Greg Balsden. And it's just such a fun atmosphere. I'm just excited to be there and to see everybody that I haven't seen in a while. And I got to say, some of the guests that we've got lined up for season 2, pretty special. If you're just kind of tuning in now, just so you know, there are 2 more episodes left in season 1, and then we're going to take the holiday season off. So we'll be off for about 6 weeks through December, weeks through December. And then we're going to come back around mid-January while you're getting ready for your Scotties and your Brier season. We're going to come back, and hopefully we're going to do more than 6 episodes in season 2. I also am going to have a special announcement coming up after the 6th episode. So for those of you that are already dreading a couple of months without this podcast, there's going to be a special announcement coming up after episode 6 that might placate you a little bit, that might make you happy. So get ready for that. Okay, this week, this is Brendan Bottcher, and I've said before on the show, and I don't want to sound too, full of myself or whatever, but I think one of my main goals with this show was to show the world some curlers that really they maybe don't know a whole lot about. And by his own admission, Brendan, pretty quiet guy, doesn't necessarily relish doing interviews or relish being in front of the camera. And so I interviewed him for Magical Question Fun Time. For those of you that follow that, pardon me, that's my interview series for Curling Canada. My interview with Kirk Myers should be up by the time you hear this, or it's coming very soon. But I interviewed Brendan for that last year, and I knew Brendan a little bit. I'd obviously played him a couple times on tour and talked to him a little bit, but he's a pretty quiet guy. Those of you that have been around on tour and you know him a little bit, he's a bit of a quiet guy. So didn't really know him too well. And then we spoke for MQFT, and I was just blown away. I just thought, man, this guy, incredibly intelligent guy, thinks the game really well. And I was just impressed. I just came away from that conversation thinking like, man, this is a guy that more people should know about, that he's very honest, very sincere guy, very open. Like, he has a lot to say about the game, and he's not afraid to say it. I think he's given a few interviews where he said some things that, kind of caught people's attention about sort of the, just the way that the playdown systems run. He's talked a little bit about the Olympic trials. He's come out and said some things about coaching, and he's just a really interesting guy. And so I knew that he was one of those guys that as soon as I came up with the idea for doing the podcast, I thought, Brendan's a guy I got to get on here. He was literally one of the first guys I messaged. I said, hey, I'm coming to Alberta. I got to get you on this show. And he was fantastic. I mean, I think, those of you that have been following him and following his career, you may not know a whole lot of the stuff that you're about to hear about him. And that excites me. That's kind of what this podcast is all about. It's really about getting a voice to maybe those players who haven't had a chance to express themselves in a more conventional media setting. And I think Brendan's one of those guys that really is going to shine in this format, and you guys are going to really like what he has to say. So yeah, it was just a very exciting interview for me to do. He was fantastic. We did this episode at Dana Ferguson's house. So I stayed at Dana's house when I was in Edmonton. She was a very gracious host. And Brendan came by after work and we chatted. And he even said at the end of the podcast, he said, he saw the time counter on my recorder. And he's like, I cannot believe that you got me to talk for 55 minutes. Because he's not necessarily the talking type. But I think, as I said, I think you're going to love what he has to say. I'm excited for everybody to hear this one, for everyone to get to know him a little bit better. I think that this is really going to open some people's eyes to just how bright of a guy he is and how he's one of the curling minds that I think is going to really bring us into this next generation of curling as some of the older curlers that are playing now start to age out, especially after this next quadrennial. Brendan seems like a guy who's going to be one of those constants that 12, 15, 20 years from now, we're going to be talking about him as a guy that's just a constant that's selling tickets on the level of a Kody, a Gushu, a McEwen, this kind of current generation. He's going to be one of the next ones coming up that I think we're going to hear his name for a long time to come. So without further ado, let's get to that. Let's hear from Brendan Bottcher. This episode of Stone and Straw is brought to you in part by Dynasty Curling. Dynasty Curling is a Canadian company that has been around since 2015, changing the landscape of curling apparel both on and off the ice. And my team uses Dynasty. We're repping the Dynasty clothes out there. They're super comfortable, super nice, and we're not the only ones who use them. Obviously, Olympic and world champions, Team Jennifer Jones, Team Chelsea Carey, Team Gushu, Team Adine, Team Kody, and many more. If you follow them on Twitter at Dynasty Curling, you can see their insanely good roster. But what a lot of people probably don't know is that Dynasty also creates a lot of curling products for off the ice as well. It could be hats and hoodies that just have the Dynasty logo on it, which look great. They have gear to support your favorite team or your favorite province at the Brier or the Scotties. And they also have workout gear, which is really cool too. So you should obviously check them out and especially check out that apparel. You probably didn't know. You probably just think, oh, it's only this sublimated curling gear I see on the ice. No, they have awesome off-ice stuff. And because they're really sweet, they have a deal just for you for listening to this podcast. If you use the promo code STONESTRAW at checkout, you'll get 10% off your any purchase you make of Dynasty off-ice apparel. So that's pretty amazing. So head on over to dynastycurling.com, enter in the promo code STONESTRAW, and you'll get 10% off your order of Dynasty off-ice apparel. And if you live in Winnipeg, they just opened a retail store, so you can check that out at the Granite Club in Winnipeg, or check them out online at Dynasty Curling on Twitter, Instagram, or dynastycurling.com. We're in Dana Ferguson's house. We've kidnapped her. We've kidnapped her house. She's not home. We didn't kidnap her.
So we broke in.
Yeah. I mean, she gave me the code to her front door, but it did feel, because she wasn't sure. She's like, oh, my brother might be home. And so like, just if he's there, like whatever. And I'm like, okay. And so like, I did feel like I was breaking in because I didn't know if she was going to be here. I didn't know if he was going to be here. It was a real time, but we did it. We survived. How have the practices been going so far? Are you feeling nice?
Good. I'm breaking in a new pair of shoes for the first time in a year, and that's an adventure, but feeling good.
Same shoes, but just a different, like a new pair or new shoes?
No, new pair, same shoes. I am going to test out the new Goldline shoe this year.
Do they have a new one?
Yeah, they've got more of an athletic type shoe. I think they came out with it midway through last year, and I didn't want to test it out in the middle of the season, so it looks
less like a giant boot.
Less like a boot, yeah. But I quite like the boot.
You like the boots? I feel like because I've always had the like slams that are like very like tight to your feet. I've never really had the like Balance Plus or Goldline like boot style shoe.
Yeah, I think just the sole is so much thicker that it helps distribute your weight a little bit.
Okay.
And I like that feeling of it.
But you like the look of the athletic ones. You're like,
well, they're more comfortable just as a shoe to walk around in.
That's true. And I guess you're the skip. So you're doing a lot of standing. Like it's not like
Yeah, I'm really not doing much.
You need a comfy shoe for that.
Yeah.
I feel like more so than sweeping. I feel like it does hurt your feet if you have a bad shoe, but I feel like you need it more for sweeping.
Yeah. I actually find in summer, one of the first few things that gets me when I'm back on the ice is just the arches in my feet get super sore just from being in a shoe that's completely different from what you wear the rest of the year. And then eventually your feet sort of work in and it's
Figure it
fine.
out.
But
They're like, oh, we're doing this again. You're doing this for another 8 months.
Really?
Cool. Yeah, that's how I feel. So I wanted to start this interview by, I interviewed you for Magical Question Fun Time for Curling Canada, and we talked about your nickname, or your so-called nickname on Wikipedia, the Bottcher Express. And I went and I looked at your Wikipedia before this interview, and turns out it's been removed from the Wikipedia page.
Wow.
So I feel like we did it. Like,
Maybe
I feel like
we
someone
did.
read the interview and they're like, oh, he doesn't even know what that nickname is. We got to go in and edit it.
Okay, well, I should give thanks to whoever did that, but I don't know who put it up in the first place, like I said.
I mean, you can thank me for doing the interview and asking you. Actually, no, because I didn't even, that was the like write-in question. So it wasn't even me. It was the person I interviewed before you.
But it was through you, so you can take some credit for that one.
Thank you. I'm always about, one thing you'll learn about me, Brendan, is I'm all about taking credit. So if I can take credit, then I will, and I am. But I do think you need a new nickname. And I have one for submission.
Oh, good.
You can see if you agree with, you can see if you like this one or not. I think it's better than the Bottcher Express. I've been calling you this to Dana for a long time, so maybe Dana has told you about it, but I call you the Botch Dog.
Oh, okay.
Like watchdog, but Botch Dog.
I'm okay with that one.
Yeah, you like that one?
I at least appreciate that someone asked me about it before we just latched on to a new nickname. I
Threw
didn't
it on
know.
the Wikipedia page. See, this is how we'll know that people really do actually care about what I'm doing, is if I log onto your Wikipedia page after this podcast comes out, and then it's like, nickname the Botch Dog.
That's true. The turnaround time there is going to be key to how relevant you are.
I mean, I know that I'm very not relevant in the world of curling, but I'm trying my best. This is like my best chance at being relevant, I think. So, so we're going to go with it, I think. Botch Dog, that's it.
I'm in.
Okay, sweet. Do you think 2 T's, like your last name? I think we got to keep the 2 T's.
I think we got to keep the 2 T's.
Yeah, because then it also sounds like if we just went with 1 T, it's kind of sounds like you like fuck things up sometimes.
Yeah, which does that. The name works for a lot of reasons. But.
Okay, so I'm starting all these interviews by asking about your start in curling, because I feel like I have no idea what it is. Some people, they talk about it in interviews. I've seen it before. I know about it. I have no idea. How did you get started? Go all the way back.
Well, neither of my parents curled at all.
Me too.
I think my dad might have thrown a handful of rocks just to like company work functions, but that's about it. I was turning on the TV during the 98 Olympics in Nagano, just watching whatever sports was on, and came across curling, and it sort of piqued my interest a little bit. And then through the week I kept following it, and I sort of latched on. Like it was something I wanted to try. So then in the fall I bugged my parents, like, there's got to be a curling club around somewhere. And yeah, there was one out in Sherwood Park. So got into like a junior learn to curl, and I just sort of latched onto it from there. I think even after year 1 or 2, I was committed. Like I knew I liked it. I knew it just brought out all the competitiveness that I have. And it was something that I could really see myself excelling at. So I wanted to give it a go. And yeah, I was in Sherwood Park for probably 2 or 3 years in like a junior learn to curl program.
How old were you?
I started when I was 10.
Okay.
So I would have been 13 or 14. And one of the coaches that was there sort of pulled me aside and said, if you want to do this more competitively, you've got to get into the city, just because there's better coaches, there's better programs, there's more kids. That's your path. So then I moved to the Shamrock, and my first...
Which is in Edmonton proper?
Yeah, which is in Edmonton.
Okay. I don't know anything about this city, so you gotta fill me in.
Not a lot of people do.
It's just so big. It's so sprawl, like I feel like every time I come here, I usually stay, like the last time I was here, I stayed with Laura Crocker and Jeff Walker. Well, I guess she's Laura Walker now. And it feels like there's just all these little neighborhoods in Edmonton, and they're all so far apart. So I know nothing. I feel.
Yeah, and we have so many curling clubs here that
it's tough.
It took me a long time before I even played in all of them.
Right.
There's still probably a few I haven't. Now
That's
that
crazy.
I think about it,
because like Vancouver, there's the Vancouver Curling Club.
Yeah,
and that's it. Well, there's Marpole Curling Club too, but those are like the only 2 that are in the like Vancouver city limits. Yeah. And Vancouver's much bigger than Edmonton. Yeah. So that's pretty crazy. Okay, so you moved to the Shamrock, and then that's when it kind of took off for you.
Yeah. So actually, fun story about that. The very first day I started the Shamrock Junior program, was Brad, my second's very first day of curling.
Oh, crazy.
So they literally had all of us kids on the backboard, and it was like a pick your team to start the season type thing, play a couple games and then see if those are the guys you want to keep playing the rest of the year with. So I was literally on the ice the very first day Brad threw a curling rock.
Wow.
And we sort of connected that way, and I've played with him ever since, with the exception of one season.
Because he like aged out of juniors before you.
No, he thought the grass was greener on the other side for a year there.
Wow. So he got rid of you.
Yeah, and then both of us sort of sucked for a year.
And then he was like, okay, take me back. Was that like, was that an awkward conversation, or was it like you both understood that you probably should still be playing together and you were like, okay, yeah, let's do it again?
Well, the year he left, he was leaving to play with one of the more accomplished junior skips that was a couple years older than me, and that was his last year. And he probably had a really good chance of winning the province that year. So it was probably a pretty good move. I mean, they didn't win the province, so it didn't work out, and we had an awful year, but...
So everyone lost
and
in
then
that
once,
scenario.
his skip aged out, he was like, well, what do I do? And I could still use a player, so...
Perfect. Now, do your parents, so my parents, I'm the same as you, and I don't meet too many people that have this same story. I feel like there are a lot of people that get into curling on their own volition, but very few of them end up curling like really competitively. And I'm not comparing the two of us. You have a much better career than I've had. But in terms of just like, you know, going to provincials, playing competitively, like my parents just don't care. Like they just can't get into curling. Like they care obviously because I'm their son, but like my dad would be like, you know, it would have been really cool if you were better at hockey than curling. Like are your parents kind of the same, or did they gravitate towards it a little more and learn all the rules and stuff? Like my parents still even kind of don't know all the rules. And
yeah, my dad bought in. He went everywhere with us all through juniors. He still goes most places that he can. And he gets it. Like I can have a pretty good, even strategy conversation with my dad. And sometimes he doesn't always know why we're doing things, but he's watched enough of me curling that he knows what I probably should be doing.
Okay. So that's good.
And
sometimes have you had that like, oh dad, you really don't know. You really don't like, have you had to lay that down a little bit? Like, dad, you're wrong, I think.
Well, I think we just had a conversation once where I needed to tell him like, your role in this relationship is not to tell me how to curl. And then from there we were fine. Mom is super supportive. She comes to lots of events to support me, I think, more than the curling. She gets it, but not quite at the same level that dad does.
Yeah, that's kind of how it's, and that's what I mean. I'm not trying to throw my parents under the bus here. Like they obviously care. My mom actually started curling like 5 years ago.
Nice.
So she just plays in like an open league, which is awesome. But yeah, there's definitely still that like, yeah, like we'll come, but like maybe we'll get there in like the fourth end, you know, like they're not like those dedicated, like, because I've played with guys that obviously like their parents curled, and so they're there all the time because they genuinely love it, as well as their son being successful at it. So we've talked about this a little bit. You obviously had coming out of juniors, you know, you win the World Juniors, you had a pretty great junior career. You won the universities at the same time, I think, right? Like pretty much right after you won the juniors. When you got into men's, how did that affect you? Because I feel like there is maybe an added pressure or expectations, being a world champion, being the best, and then getting into men's, and now all of a sudden you're not the best. What was that transition like? It's
just a huge reality check. My last year of juniors, when we won the World Juniors, I had a separate team because Brad and Karik had aged out of juniors. So I was playing with those guys for university curling, but also men's curling.
Right.
And we, like my 2 seasons that year were night and day. Our junior season, our win record was probably 90% and our men's record was probably 55%. And it just takes a long time to figure it out. The game's a lot different. I think even more so on the men's side than the women's side. The gap between sort of that elite junior level and the elite men's level is just massive.
And why do you think that that's a bigger gap between men's and women's? Just because of the consistency of hits and peels and big shots, or the sweeping, or both? It's
a combo. The consistency is a huge part of it.
Yeah.
Men's curling is a chess match for a lot of it. Like a lot of the shots, the execution is sort of just, it's assumed.
Yes.
Because the guys are shooting 85, 90, 95%. So if you're making 15 shots an end, it's pretty much a chess match minus the few half shots in the middle. And the strategy that the elite men's curlers played, especially when I graduated out of juniors, I was playing against Martin and Furby and Howard and Stoughton and McEwen and Jacobs and Gushu. And that's a pretty good list.
A very good list, yeah.
And to try to keep up with those guys, even strategy wise, was tough for the first little while. And in juniors, when you're one of the best, you get a little more aggressive and you can out execute people. So you sort of play a strategy that allows that to come through. And all of a sudden you're playing men's curling and all those guys are out executing you.
Yeah. And they know how to call a game better than you.
Yeah. So it compounds pretty fast, especially if you try and go too aggressive.
So was there ever a time where that was really frustrating for you, or did you kind of just understand, like you said, I mean, you did play juniors and men's at the same time. Did you just kind of understand inherently, like, I know that I just have to lose a lot before I get better, or was it frustrating to be like, I won the Worlds, I'm going to the Universiade, all this stuff. Was it tough ever?
Tough, yes. We always had a plan, and I think that really helped. So, like I say, in juniors, we were probably one of the most aggressive teams on the junior tour, and in men's, we were definitely one of the most defensive teams on tour. And that really gave us an advantage early on when we couldn't always keep up in execution. You take a 10-end curling game, and if you can whittle it down to 3 or 4 ends, and you can get to the last couple ends and you're within a point or two, then you get sort of your one half shot or your one full shot, and you got a chance, right? Whereas if you play yourself out of the game early, you're off the ice in an hour.
Yeah. Yeah, no, for sure. So it was never a thing where you had a meltdown or a moment where you were like, oh man, I don't know how I'm going to figure this out.
No, I was pretty realistic. I mean, I was 22 at the time, 23, and I was playing against guys that were in their last quarter of their career that were 40 plus years old. I mean, if you're expecting to win too many of those games, that's a little on you, right?
For sure.
Like you're going to take your share of thumping before you figure it out, and also before a lot of those guys age out, and you're slowly progressing through, right? Like my goal was always, and still is, to try and be one of the best for my age.
Right.
And if I can compete with guys that are older than me, that's great. That means I'm sort of ahead of the curve a little where I should be. But that's what I'm striving to do. I'm striving to be one of the best 26-year-olds in curling.
Sure. Do you think that there's a number where that changes, where all of a sudden everyone's on an even playing field? Like, do you think you'll reach an age where you can no longer go, okay, well, I'm pretty good for a 31-year-old or whatever? Like, is there a median, do you think?
I don't know if that's true. Like, obviously, once you're sort of the average age of, for me, the elite skips, you can sort of stop using that anymore. Right. But a lot of it's a head game too. I mean, at the end of the day, I'm competing at face value against all those guys. But if in my own head, I can convince myself that I've still got years to grow, that sort of helps me rationalize the getting thumped for a few years, right?
Sure. Do you notice that there's sorry, go ahead. I didn't mean to
interrupt. I was just going to say, I think once you get to early 30s, then as a skip, then you're sort of not the young guy anymore. But you look, even this Brier, the last year, I was maybe the second or third youngest skip. I mean, I wasn't even close to the average. Right. So for me, that was a good sense of accomplishment. Yeah, absolutely. Now, I think too, is there a sense that you, that there's maybe like a little bit of I don't want to say ageism in curling, but a little bit of, you're talking about, I wanted to be the best 23-year-old curler, 24-year-old, 25-year-old skip or whatever. At what point do you think maybe other skips start to ignore that as well? Because I feel like when you come out of juniors, you got a big track record. People know who you are, and you had quite a bit of success right away in men's, really, overall. Do you feel like there's a
a reverse kind of effect as well, where that teams maybe aren't respecting you for a while and they kind of look at you like, he's 23, like whatever. And then is there a time or an age, like when did you start to feel like maybe you were getting a little bit more respect or?
Well, yeah, I would say that definitely happens. For me, right out of juniors, like we switched to a very defensive strategy. We had a plan. We always had great coaching. And we caught a lot of teams off guard those first couple years because we were so young and we were so inexperienced comparatively. And, we executed our plan. We kept it close to the last couple ends and we won a lot of games that we probably shouldn't have won. And then the couple of years after that, teams sort of figured out what we were doing and we got some more respect. And then we were playing against guys that were playing their best as opposed to playing against guys that thought it was a pushover.
Right. And
that was hard for a couple of years. But I do think the elite curling world is a very tight-knit, closed group. And you've got to earn your stripes a little bit before you're just accepted into that club.
And so for you, when did you feel like you earned those stripes? Because I would say people now, obviously you came second in the Brier, you had a good showing at the trials. I would say there's no doubt in my mind that people include you in that elite group. When did it feel, at least to you, like I'm in, I've done it, I've earned it?
To be honest, it probably wasn't even until this year. Last year we accomplished one of my lifetime goals in curling. We made it to the Brier. That's what everyone's playing
of course.
For.
Me too, still. Let me quit, Brendan. I just want to make it to the Brier so I can quit.
But we went there and our expectations weren't where they needed to be and we were rattled and we didn't play well. And I think the world of curling saw that. And I think even after then we were, okay, these guys still got to prove themselves. Like they went out there and they were awful.
Right.
And on tour, you're going to have your good weeks if you play enough.
Yeah, of course. It's a law of averages at some point.
This year, we took a different approach. This last season, we played a few more smaller events, partly to gain the confidence that we needed to have.
Kicking teams like mine in the ass.
It's a part of the process.
Dude, hey, listen, I'm happy to do it, man.
And we really went into the pre-trials with a lot of confidence and we proved ourselves there. And then really in Ottawa at the trials, I think that was for us. We still didn't qualify, so the world of curling might not have taken note, but we were close. And
yeah, for sure you guys were.
If we could have closed out some of the games that we already on paper had won, we would have been in the mix. And for me, that's everyone playing their absolute best in the highest pressure situation in 4 years. And for us to come out and show the way we did, I took a lot of confidence from that. And I think there were others that saw that too as like, whoa, maybe these guys aren't just like a flash in the pan 1 or 2 years and then gone type deal.
Right.
And then we just kept that confidence going and kept doing all the things we needed to do and carried that through to the Brier and really ended up playing against the same teams, but we just closed out a few more games than we did in the trials.
Right. And so I think it's interesting you talked about expectations going into your first Brier, and I think a lot of teams get caught up in that, right? You go in and you think to yourself, well, I'm just happy to be here. This is what I dreamed about my whole life. And now I'm here. And then, like you said, you have a few results don't go your way. And all of a sudden you're like, oh shit, we're not doing so great. Was it what happened in terms of your expectation setting? Like if you could do it again, how would you have maybe approached that a little bit differently? Or is there a way you would have approached it differently? Or was it just the fact that, hey, it was your first Brier, it was a crazy Brier in Newfoundland, all that kind of stuff? Is there a way you would have done it differently? Or is there a way to even have those expectations going in of like, I don't care if it's my first Brier and all our first Briers, like we're going to win this?
To be honest, I'd say that we were maybe on the opposite side of that. So
too high.
The Brier is different and the Scotties is different. And I think any of the top curlers will tell you that. There's very few that go to their first and it's an overwhelming success. it's different, and it's a really long week, and in the same sense, it's a super short week. Like you figure out the math you need to be in the hunt, and holy crap, it's Monday morning or Tuesday morning, and you've got to go 8-1 for the rest of the week to have a sniff, right? Like your week's over pretty fast, even though you've still got a half dozen games left. And we actually went in there with pretty high expectations. We had looked at how we were playing. We were looking at the stats. We were all throwing it great. And we expected to be in the hunt. And we came out against Brad Gushu first game in Newfoundland, and we played really well. I was super impressed with how we played. We came right down to the very end. We were in it the whole way. If anything, I thought had he not played 100%, we might have had a chance to win that game. We lost that game, and then we got on a 2 or 3 game slide there. And the reality that the week wasn't going to go like we had maybe planned on it going was very hard for us to process and deal with. And just your confidence takes such a hit because you work so hard and you finally made your goal of being in the Brier, and you just want to play well for all the wrong reasons. You want to play well so the fans have good games to watch, and your parents and all your family that's flown halfway across the country are proud in you, and your sponsors are happy because you're getting lots of TV time and you're doing all those things you need to do. And this year it was the dead opposite. I went into the Brier solely wanting to play the best that I could personally. That was my goal the whole week. Was Brendan needs to be in the headspace to just play well. And if we win, we win. If we lose, we lose. I can live with that. But it wasn't about any of that other stuff. It was just, all I'm going to do is go out there and try and throw the best 20 curling shots I can, and then we'll see what happens.
And so that was I guess that's the lesson that you take away. Like you say, the Brier, the Scotties, they feel different. That's the different feel. That's what you take away is you go, okay, I have to go in and be maybe a little bit more singularly focused as opposed to trying to do all these things.
And I think that's what's different about those events. There's so much going on. There's so much stuff and there's so much baggage, and it's hard to process, especially I was 25 at the time. It was hard. Especially when you have the expectation that you're going to do well, and then maybe it doesn't quite pan out that way. It was tough on the head for sure, but everything that's happened since we got back from Newfoundland, I wouldn't trade that experience for the life of me, because, we didn't start the pre-trials great. We were barely in the mix to be in a tiebreaker halfway through the week. We didn't start the trials great. We played well against some of the top teams and then gave the games away at the end. And even at the Brier, we weren't our best at times. And all 3 of those weeks, we sort of came together and said, we know what it feels like for this week to get out of control, and we know what it feels like to turn it around. And let's just keep doing it our way and not get too rattled, and it'll come around.
Yeah. Do you think that part of that again is just your youth? Like, is that something that you think about now in terms of expectation setting, where you want to become the team that paces the field as opposed to the team that's coming from behind always? You've talked about, you've had basically the 4 biggest events in your team's history. You've had a slow start. Is that something that you think about now, or does it matter? Is that something that you care about, or is that part of just the growing process and the getting better and the competing with the Joneses and whatever?
I think it's part of the process. What's surprising to me that I've just slowly been figuring out here is the best teams don't have to do a whole lot special. They make some big shots when they need to, but the vast majority of it is they are tight and they execute all the shots they should make almost perfectly, and therefore their shots get easier, so they play even better. So their shots get easier, so they play even better. And at the end of the day, they're throwing a lot of open draws, open hits, and guards, and the teams that are playing against them are playing all the hard shots. So it's not really a surprise that they play 90% and the bad teams play 68%, right? And I think that was a good realization for me, that it's not about trying to do more or trying to do something different. All you got to do is execute the easy shots, and then you get more easy shots. And then the confidence you get from that is what propels you the whole way, right? Then if you're playing 90% and you've got a run back or a triple or whatever it is, you've got some confidence that you're actually going to make it. Where when you're 55, 60, 70%, the confidence you have is so low, it's tough.
Right. Well, and two, usually if you're playing that high of a percentage, when you're playing those run backs and stuff, and this is obviously something teams talk about, it's for 2 or 3 or 4 points, as opposed to you got to make the run back just to not give up a steal, or making it for 1 or whatever the case. And then I think that probably also helps put you in a bit of a more focused mindset. Like, oh, we had a great end. I make this run back. We're going to get 3. And
oh, for sure. That's all in the headspace. Like if you've got 1 for sure and you've got a run back for 3 and you miss it and you're still up 1 without, it's good end. Yeah. Like we left our skip a shot to win the game. We didn't quite make it, but we're still in control. If you're down 2 and they're laying 2 and you've got to run back double to score 3 and you miss it, the game's over.
Yeah.
And that just completely changes everything mentally.
Yeah, no, I think because I've heard you talk before and obviously I've interviewed you before and you talk a lot about, I feel like you're one of the sharper guys in the game. I'm not putting anyone down, but I think you think about the game a lot. And it was interesting, like looking at your career as a whole, like getting prepared for this interview. And it does feel to me like you've had periods of playing really well and periods of really not playing well. You've had cold periods and then you've had hot periods. Obviously, this last year, I would say you kind of broke out of that and were very consistent for the whole year. But before that, your results were, fairly mixed. I'm sure you can agree with that. So I guess my question is, how do you come out of those cold periods? Are those, is that reflection for you? Is that like, okay, we're playing not as well as we want to, do we have to fix things? Or is it just a matter of you've maybe got a new plan to start the year and you're working towards executing it? Like, I just want to get a sense from you of like, do you feel like that you run cold and hot, or is it just a matter of you're constantly revising things?
A little of all of the above.
Sorry, yeah, that's a long question.
We've been through a fair number of players in the last 4 or 5 years, right? And that matter is compounded a little bit by the fact the other 3 of us have stayed together,
sure.
Right? So we're so tight that we often don't have to talk about some of the things that we probably should talk about. And we take a lot of things just for granted because we've all grown up in the same system. We know how it works and it just is what it is. So to bring an outsider in and for that to just work has been a little challenging for us. And I think that has definitely played a part in the hot and cold streak part of it. And this last year, I think with Darren, we really started feeling just comfortable. Like we were all as a foursome on the same page as opposed to being 3 and 1. I think as a young curler, especially, you've got to accept that roller coaster a little bit. The best guys are the most consistent day in, day out, season in, season out. But it takes a while to get there. I mean, when I was coming out of juniors, my best game was pretty good. It could compete with the top curlers, but my worst game was nowhere close. And that's the thing you got to bring up. I mean, if you want to truly be one of the best, your bad games have to get better. You have to find a way to not let it get to 68%. You've got to cap it at 78% or 80%. That's got to be your bad game. And then long term, it'll eventually sort itself out. But when you're 22, 23, 24, that's tough. That's tough.
Yeah, because I think that's a great point, and I think a lot of people don't talk enough about that, and especially at the skip position. I mean, if your worst game is 50 or 60%, you're not giving your team a chance. It doesn't matter. They could all be curling 100. If you're at 50 or 60 and you're playing a top team, you're losing that game. And so I think that's absolutely right. That's something that's interesting that you thought about and focused on. So what does that process look like for you? Is that just you like trying to get, obviously I'm trying to look past the obvious things of like, of course you practice more and you've had more experience and whatever. Is that something that you work on by yourself? Is that something that comes with confidence in your team? How do you bring that, because the way you said it kind of made it sound like you're almost blaming yourself a little bit. Like, yeah, I could have the best game, but I could also have a really terrible game. So is bringing that up, is that just a solely like, Brendan's got to think about this, or is it something that you work with people, or you figure that out over time?
Well, I think you need a balance. You need to own the part of it that's yours. And often you're just not playing well enough.
Yeah.
And I take a lot of pride in how I practice and the things I do in practice. And I think that's what really elevates my game. And there's most weekends where I can tell you going into the weekend what kind of a weekend it's going to be. And I think as a skip, how you are as a thrower really impacts how you are as a skip. If you have the confidence in your shot making, the rest of the game gets so much easier. And if you're fighting it and you're spending too much time thinking about you as a thrower, you're not thinking about you as a skip or you as a strategist or you as a line caller or an ice reader or all those other things that are important. And it just spirals a little bit. And sometimes when I'm in one of those slumps, I'm trying to process so much because I'm just trying to figure it out. I know I need to have the confidence as a thrower, so I sort of exclusively focus on that. And then you realize sort of you're dropping the ball on all those other things that are important, and it's just overwhelming.
Yeah.
So for me, the fix is almost always getting out, throwing rocks, trying to technically throw the best curling rock that I can. And at least then you have a baseline, because one of the most frustrating things as a skip is not understanding. Like, you feel like you had the broom in the right spot. You felt like the weight you were throwing was good, and you just weren't close. Like, you're not that dumb.
Yeah.
So clearly you were missing something. And that feeling is hard to process.
Right. And to take in as yourself, to be like, I did something that missed that shot.
Yes. And for me, like if I'm not sliding straight, just your perception and your feedback all gets so much worse.
Right. Yeah, no, that makes sense. I mean, I've played front end my whole life, so understanding how to be a skip it's above my pay grade. I'll put it that way. But no, I think those are all super interesting points. Oh, hey, Dana's home. Hey, what's up? We're just in the middle. We're just recording.
She's interrupting our.
Yeah, what the hell? Well, I'm super important. You've never. Well, yeah, Brendan's way more important than me, but yeah, that's cool. How was your workout?
That was hard.
Yeah. Cool. Well, enjoy. Yeah. Okay. Bye. Okay. Good luck.
Bye.
Yeah. Dana Ferguson from Chelsea Carey's team just came in, and she was very sweaty. She just hit a workout. So anyway, we're recording this at Dana's house. We talked about that already, but anyway, I'm glad that she's here. This episode is brought to you by Hardline Curling Supplies. And I'm happy that it is brought by Hardline Curling Supplies, because I'm a Hardline Nation member. My team's been using Hardline for the last 5 years. We were onto Hardline products before they were even on Dragon's Den. Can you believe that? Ice Pad. It's the most technologically advanced brush on the market. You don't believe me? 7 of the top 9 men's teams and 10 of the top 15 women's teams in the world are all using this brush. Kevin Cooey, Brad Gushu, Nicholas Adine, Anna Hasselborg, Reed Carruthers, Chelsea Carey, Mike McEwen, the list goes on. And they're great for the rec curler too. Don't just think, oh, I club curl, it's not good enough for me. It's phenomenal for you. It helps with your shoulders. You can use it for over 100 games. When your head wears out, you just throw it in the wash and you can use it again. It saves you money. It helps the environment. And they got a lot of great products too. They've got the best pants. Are you one of those cold curlers who's always complaining about how you're cold? Well, guess what? They've got super comfy and warm pants. They've got great shoes, shirts, helmets, broom bags, whatever you need. And if you were looking for that best delivery aid on the planet, that's Reed Carruthers Pro Slide, which you can get exclusively from Hardline Curling. It's guaranteed for life. your one-stop shop for all your curling needs. So visit Hardline at www.hardlinecurling.com or go to any one of the 120 Hardline retailers around the world and get your products today. Okay, so I want to get back to, we lost the thread a little bit there because Dana came home, but that's okay. You were talking about the 3-in-1, about you and Karek and Brad played together for so long and it became difficult to talk sometimes about what maybe needed to be talked about. Is that kind of what happened with Pat? Because I feel like everybody thought you connecting with Pat was going to be this like big thing. Like, this is the guy, Brendan's a young guy. This is who he needs. This is going to make him a better player. And obviously that didn't happen. Now I know Pat had some injuries and that's part of why he stepped away, but do you feel like the results were partly Pat sort of thought he was maybe going to come in and have maybe more of an influence than he ended up having? Or is that something that contributed to that not working?
I would have said a lot of the same things that you thought. I mean, bringing Pat onto the team was huge.
Yeah.
It's similar to you. Like, I was young and I thought, hey, this is what we're missing. This is that ingredient that we didn't have. And I think when Pat left, we really had an honest reflection of, like, there's some things that we need to be sharpening up and doing differently, regardless who plays with us. And our communication on some things just has to get better. Just because I know and you know doesn't mean that the fourth person knows. And often they're sort of out in the wilderness on their own and they're lost and it's hard, right? And with Pat too, we curled together for September to December, so a total of 3.5 months. And it's hard forming a new team to gel that instantly. And even with Darren, I would say the same thing. Our first 3 months with Darren, we won the provincial, but then we had an awful Brier, and it probably took us at least 3 or 4 months of curling together before we really figured it out and clicked too. So I think there is a adjustment period that a lot of people don't always factor in to the equation. And I think that the other three of us growing up a little bit and just getting that 1.5 years more experience helped too. I mean, we're all just trying to figure it out at the end of the day.
Yeah, no doubt. So is that so the success that came with Darren coming to the team, do you feel like that was as much the three of you growing up with Pat as it was Darren bringing the right things? Or how did that look like? Because I think obviously, you guys have already committed for the next quadrennial. I've known Darren for a long time. He seems like a great fit with you guys and he seems to be having, a lot of fun, which maybe he wasn't before that. I mean, I think he's even said that in interviews that he kind of stopped playing because he wasn't really having fun anymore. So what were the ingredients there? Was it a combination of both of those things, or what's the thing that Darren has, or maybe the three of you grew that has, allowed this to be such a successful team?
I think him as a teammate, he brings so much intangible stuff to the team. His ability to identify a problem and talk about it, regardless of the emotions that are involved in that, I've never seen someone like that. I mean, the other three of us are all pretty quiet, and it would be really easy for us to not talk about some things just because it's awkward or because, I don't want to make my best friends feel bad,
Yeah, of course, sure.
And there's just none of that bullshit with Darren. If there's something we need to talk about, we talk about it. And I think our communication has gotten a lot better and can still get better in the future. I think he is great for me in a vice skipping role. I think he does a really good job of working with the front two guys in game so that we're all connected. And that really frees me up as a skip to focus on the things I need to work on, as opposed to trying to manage everything that's going on.
So has that made you better individually as a communicator, would you say? Because you said that, obviously when the four of you are sitting around a table, it's nice that you have Darren to interject and say what he's feeling, and it helps you guys as a team come together. But has that also improved you individually, where now maybe Brendan's got to have a talk with Brad or with Karek? Has that made you better, or is that still a work in progress?
It has. That's something I'm probably going to be working on for as long as I'm curling, to be honest. It's just not always in my nature to bring up some of the hard things, because at the end of the day, I know what everyone's sacrificing, and I know how much it means, and to sort of quantify that and say you're not doing enough or you're not doing it right is hard. And it's hard to hear that. I know it's hard when I hear that. So I can only imagine what my guys are feeling when I tell them. So it's a work in progress. I think Darren's really freed me up in a lot of ways, so that isn't my role.
Gotcha.
He's allowed me to focus on some other things because he does those things for me. And he does those things for the team. And I think that's huge.
Nice. Okay, I just want to go back a little bit and talk about, this is something that I'm interested in, because I feel like you were kind of the first team, and we've seen it now a little bit more, especially with Alberta, but with other schools as well. You're kind of like the first guy that was like a university curler. You know, it seemed like everyone else, people played for their university, but it was like that was just a thing they did on the side. Like they had their junior team, and then either their junior team all went to the same university, so happy birthday, you can all play at CIS, or you didn't have the same team, but you knew a couple other guys that curled that went to your school and you played together. You were like the University of Alberta team, and you wore their jackets even playing in men's spiels, and your coach was from there and everything like that. So I just wanted to know how that was a positive, and maybe how some of the things that were maybe negative about that, or just tell me about that experience in general. I hate questions that are like, tell me about this, but like, really, I don't know that much about it. I mean, it kind of felt like you guys were sort of the first guys that were sort of running your whole show through a university. Yeah.
I mean, we got into the program at the U of A pretty close to the beginning.
Yeah.
And Rob was pretty honest. I mean, he had a plan, and there wasn't a lot of creative input from us. It was you can be in my program if you want to be in my program. I will decide what you do and how you play and who you play with and where we play. And I think that I know how to make you good at curling. And if you can just buy into that and accept that I'm going to make a lot of the decisions, maybe that'll free you up to just focus on curling, and that'll be not bad too. And early on, I knew that was a pretty good ticket. I could see pretty instantly that a lot of the systems he implemented, especially in juniors, were instantly winners. The strategy we played, the events we played, it was just all thought out. And in junior curling, it's just so random. And that was huge. I think as we transitioned into men's more and more, you've got to mix it up a little bit because you play the same team so much that they eventually figure out what you're going to do, and they know everything about you. So if you're not always keeping it a little bit fresh, it gets tough that way too. But the program he has over there, it's just produced so many of the top teams and the top curlers in Canada that there's something to it. I think that's without a doubt.
So was that something that you had to figure out yourself? So like what does that transition look like? So you have Rob's program. He's basically telling you when you're going to sleep, when you're going to the bathroom, like he's got all this going on. How do you transition to becoming your own man after that?
Well, in a lot of ways, us bringing Pat onto the team was us at least separating from that structure a little bit. We weren't going to bring a guy like Pat onto the team and then not let him bring anything to the team.
Right.
That would make no
course.
sense.
Yeah.
So I had a real honest chat with Rob as we were deciding where to go there. And he sort of thought it was the right time. And obviously bringing someone like Pat onto the team, we all had really high hopes that it was going to work. So, we went with it. That gave me a little bit of separation. And now I think we're a good blend in the middle. We've sort of come back and we do a lot of the same things that we did with Rob. And we have some extra things that we do now. And I think that combo has been working well for us.
So ultimately, that was a net positive experience, obviously, going through that.
There's a lot of the worst experiences I've had in curling, like the Brier and St. John's, ended up being one of the best things for me as a curler. I mean, that's the thing people don't understand. They look at they look at someone and, well, you've won this and you've won this and you've been to this. And on the flip side, like all those people have lost so much.
Yeah.
Like I remember Kevin told me once, I mean, you're going to be in a lot of finals in your life if you're good at curling, and you're going to win about 50%.
Yeah.
Like at the front end, you're going to be a little less than 50%. And at the end of your career, you're probably going to balance that out and be a little over 50%. But all you can really do is try and get in as many finals as you can, and you'll win your share. And eventually you'll learn to win them too, which I think is a big part of it. And that is so true. I mean, I've lost so many big curling games personally on last shot.
Yeah.
It just is what it is. And you've got to find a way not to beat yourself up. And you've got to find a way to convince yourself that the next one, you'll figure it out.
So when am I going to start winning?
Well,
I'm just
I don't know if I want you to start winning for at least a couple of years here.
Dude, I'm long gone. You don't have to worry about me. I'll be long gone. Thank you for saying that, but I think it's just going to be losses for me. It's like you look at many sports. Some guys, they just never win. I think I'm just going to be that guy. I'm just going to lose those finals, and that's okay.
Well,
I got a podcast now.
Not the best attitude ever. If I was,
I'm just
your
a
coach.
lead, Brendan, and I make a lot of shots.
And that is important.
And that's important, No, I'm deliberately being facetious. I have a couple more questions for you, and then we'll wrap this bad boy up. This is now a little less related to. Do you have somewhere you need to be? Sorry,
no.
Okay,
no.
I don't want to overstay your welcome or overstay my own welcome. I don't know. Anyway.
In Dana's house.
Yeah. I don't think she cares. Okay, so we talked on when I interviewed you for Magical Question Fun Time. We got into talking about professionalism in curling because I always ask the question, what's a stupid thing that you believed was true for a long time? And you told me that being a professional curler, that you believed stupidly that you could be a professional curler, and then this year you tried to be a professional curler and it didn't work out. Can you elaborate on that for me and for the listeners? I mean, I know you and I have already discussed it a little bit, but what do you mean by you think that professional curling is a myth, at least as the game stands now?
I think just on a basic level, there aren't the dollars in curling for it to make sense. I mean, if you've got guys that have families and mortgages, it's tough. And the pressure that puts on you as a curler makes it even tougher. And, there are a few guys and girls, mostly at the latter part of their careers, where they've sort of transitioned to being professional curlers. But I think if they're honest, they have a lot of side stuff on the go, and they were working for a long time too. And there definitely isn't a way to set yourself up for the future. I mean, even if I could rent a 1-bedroom apartment and live in there and commit for 4 years, I'm going to be a professional curler and I only need $800 a month to live. Where does that leave you 4, 8, 12 years from now? I mean, now you're mid-30s, you haven't worked in a dozen years. You have no experience to compete with all these people that are coming straight out of university. Like, how are you going to live your next 60 years? It just doesn't make sense. So for me, that was always important. I mean, I was trying to be a professional curler, but I also got an engineering degree in the process, mostly because my parents had a good chat with me, and it was, we support curling and we want you to be the best. But you also have to think about what the rest of your life's going to look like. And I think for me, it's given me a lot of perspective in the whole deal. The fact that, I've got a great home life, I've got a great work life, and I'm a top curler. And I don't think we're at a place yet where that's hindering anyone. I mean, certainly a lot of the top teams in Canada are starting to get pressed by a lot of the top Europeans. Mm-hmm. Because they are full-time curlers, but a lot of those full-time curlers, once they're done curling, have the same tough go that we'd have in Canada. It's not like they're set for life either. And I think curling's really due for a bit of a coming out party relative to all the dollars making sense based on the TV ratings.
Yeah, no kidding.
We're one of the few sports where there isn't a players bargaining group that actually bargains for the rights of the players. Every team's out for themselves. They do what they can. They make it work. But if we all came together, what we'd be able to get would be, I think, quite a bit more than what we're getting now. And that's just a little bit sad, to be honest. I mean, it's the same thing that the players group was fighting for back in the early 2000s. Mm-hmm. And curling's come a long way since then. So I'm not trying to discount any of that. I wish there was a way to make it work. I mean, I would love nothing more than for that to make sense. It just doesn't.
So what I'm hearing is Brendan Bottcher starting the Curling Players Union on the Stone and Straw podcast. That's what I'm hearing right now. He's going to be the head. He's fully willing to put in all the work.
On top of
his work life and his home life and his because you kind of mentioned, or you sort of intimated when we were doing that interview that you needed the work balance too for you, that you were starting to go a bit stir crazy, that you almost felt like having a job makes you a better curler.
Yeah, I mean, you can only curl so many hours a day.
Yeah,
I've been over to China or Korea where they curl 6 or 8 hours a day, and that certainly it doesn't really get them much farther ahead. I think you hit a ceiling at some point. And for me, that was the hardest part. Like I didn't work for 10 months, and getting up in the morning and finding ways to occupy your time outside of the 2 hours you spent on the ice and the hour you spent in the gym. Like, what do you do? It was hard. It was hard to get motivated. I found myself just sluggish. It was even hard for me in that day where I had nothing on the go to even make curling practice. Like, I was just so slow that what was the point a lot of the time? And
why did I wake up?
Like, you can only read so much and you can only binge watch Netflix so much. And like, what do you do?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's similar to golf. You know, people compare curling to golf a lot, and it's like that. It's like, what's the difference between throwing 32 rocks and 132 rocks, or hitting 100 balls and hitting 1,000 balls, or whatever? You know, at some point there's a cap, right?
Now, golf is different, just in the sense that you can actually make a living off it. So it makes
much
sense.
Different. Yes.
But if you go to the range and you hit a bucket of balls and then you go play a round of golf, you're probably in for 5 or 6 hours, right?
Yeah.
And that
takes up enough of your day that you don't feel like a piece of shit.
Well, yeah. And you fit a workout into that and you've got your full 8-hour workday, right?
Yeah.
It was just that sense of accomplishment that I was sort of missing.
Right.
And curling is great. I love it. It's a huge, huge part of my life. But it's not the only part. And I think having other things on the go makes some of those losses a little easier to stomach, right?
Yeah.
Like if have a rough couple weekends and then I can find a way to have a pretty successful couple weeks at work,
yeah, you're
getting something out of that, right? Now the logistics around practicing and curling and working are hard.
Yeah, of course.
But that's just, I think everyone in curling has that problem.
Yes, we do. Okay, last question before we wrap this bad boy up. Again, I've massaged you. I've told you I think you're one of the sharpest guys out there. Where do you see teams now gaining an edge? Because I feel like, you know, we've talked about, there's been talk of analytics and stuff like that, and I know a lot of the top teams are using that. But I feel like, especially in the men's game at the top level, it's pretty evened out. You know, I mean, there's at least 10 teams or more on any given weekend that you could go, that's the best team in the world, or they're playing the best. You know, it's the gaps are getting significantly smaller. Again, I think part of it is the professionalism of the game, but the gaps are getting smaller. Where do you see, maybe even, it doesn't even have to be right now, you don't have to reveal any of the special sauce that Team Bottcher's got going on, but maybe in the next decade, where do you see curling going that's maybe going to widen some of those gaps?
I think actually the transition to the 5-rock rule here will set a lot of teams back a little bit. I'm not sure anyone quite has the strategy nailed, whereas the 4-rock strategy was turning into chess match a little bit. There's a lot less of that in 5-rock rule curling. The shots are quite a bit harder, and you've got to play more of them. Whereas in 4-rock rule curling, I mean, you blank 6 ends and it sort of is what it is. You only got to make a few shots.
Yeah.
But in 5-rock rule curling, every shot seems to matter more, and I think that's gonna help the game quite a bit. I think the biggest place we're headed is just consistency. I think the best teams are gonna miss by less, and that's what a lot of the best teams now are doing. I mean, Gushu's guys, if they're missing by inches, and whereas other guys are missing by feet. It's not a fair comparison. And that's really where the best teams are getting, is they're just, especially on the simple shots. If they want to rock full top 4, there's a good chance it's full top 4, not biting the button, not biting the 8-foot. It's in the 4-foot.
Right.
And a lot of teams would be okay with sort of
it's close enough.
Top button to full top 8 range. Well, if you exacerbate that over 100 shots in a curling game and you have that extra margin in every one, the angles are all a little off, and that makes your next shots harder. And I think all that compounds so much. I think that's where we're all headed.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, because teams are getting so much better in sweeping. We're having so much more control of the rocks. I think those are all contributing factors, at least to that, to the missing by inches and being able to say, okay, I want it right here, you know.
And that opens up a lot more in the strategy aspect too. If the consequence of your miss goes down because you're just not going to miss, or you're going to miss by so little it probably doesn't matter, then you start playing shots that have a lot more upside, right?
Yeah.
And you can really put the screws to whoever you're playing against if you get a half miss somewhere along the way, because you know for the rest of the end you can pretty much execute out.
Yeah, you'll be in control. Well, excellent. Thank you, Brendan. Thank you for talking. Would you like to plug some sponsors, some websites, any of that kind of good stuff?
Yeah, well, we've got 3 great sponsors. 2 that have been with us for a little while now. The Driving Force and Gold Line are sticking with us for next year. And then Spartan Controls is coming on board with us this year. It's
nice.
The company I work for as of about 6 months ago.
Excellent.
And no one can do what they do without that.
Of course.
I mean, it would make absolutely no sense then. So we're super appreciative, and hopefully we can do well and have a good showing for them and for us this year.
Excellent. Well, thank you again, and thanks everyone for listening. This has been the Stone and Straw podcast with Brendan Bottcher. All right, there you have it. That is Brendan Bottcher. And like I said off the top, I just hope that you got a better chance to know him. I think if you've met him at an event or if you've played on tour for a while, you'll know he's a bit of a shy guy. And so I was just excited to get him sitting down, get him talking. And I really hope that this opens some people's eyes about what a special guy he is and what I think he's going to really contribute. I mean, a lot of people may not know, but he was part of the revamping of the point system. So a lot of people thought the points were maybe a little bit imbalanced a couple years ago. And so for this last quadrennial that just passed, Brendan essentially fixed the point system himself and made all the recommendations, and they went with his system. So he helped a lot with that. And he's just a bright guy, a really nice guy. And I hope this sort of opens some people's eyes to what Brendan is all about. Thanks everybody for tuning in. As always, a few people to thank. I'd like to thank Graham Wright for that wonderful theme song from Tokyo Police Club. If you haven't checked out their new album TPC, do that. It is in stores now or wherever you get your downloadable music. I'd like to thank my producer, Daniel Cuzzetto, for making me sound good and making this whole thing sound good. I'd like to thank my question contributor, Matt Sussman. You can check him out on Twitter at sus2-. Great guy, great help with this podcast. He always has a good angle on things that maybe I didn't see, and he's responsible for at least 1 or 2 questions that you hear every week. So thank you to him. Thanks to Kody Audette, my graphic designer. Thanks to CurlingZone, Dynasty, Hardline. Thank you to you for listening to this. If you like it, please share it. Please just tell your friends, tell people on Twitter. There's nothing that makes me happier than going on Twitter after I release an episode and seeing people sharing it around and talking about how much they loved it, especially if you're a curler, especially if you're a competitive curler. I think that's what's going to really get people into this. And every time it gets shared, I see a noticeable spike in the downloads. And so if you're listening to this and you like it, please do me a favor, share it on Twitter, share it on Facebook, whatever you're doing, Instagram. I don't care. Wherever you do your thing online, please share it around, tell your friends, and you can rate and review it on iTunes if you'd like. And that's it. We've got one more episode in this season that's coming up next week, and that is going to be Steve Laycock. I actually interviewed him right before I played him at the Vernon Cash Spiel. So again, Steve is a guy much like Brendan. I think he's an incredibly thoughtful guy, super intelligent, thinks a ton about the game. And I think you guys are going to love it in the same way that you most likely, I hope, loved this one. So stay tuned for that. That'll be episode 6 of season 1, our season finale. It's me, it's Steve Laycock. This is the Stone and Straw podcast. Follow us on Twitter at Stone Straw Pod. You can follow me on Twitter at Cullen the Curler. That's it. Thank you guys for tuning in. Thank you for being the best fans. We'll see you all next week for the end of season 1.